Hi, I'm Jeremy. This is my project one for the class. My project is called the Maker Collective. It's a community hub for independent creative artists. I built this entirely on my own, so every layer you're about to see, the PHP backend, the HTML structure, and the CSS styling was done by me. So I'll walk through the required questions, the whole presentation, and the different items of this project. So a quick orientation before the deep dive. The site is a maker community hub. It has six fictional member artists across six different disciplines. A gallery, a page that helps, which is like a gallery, that a page that helps a visitor compare crafts, and a commission contact form. It's four PHP pages sharing one shared layout. On top of that on top of that core build, I added exactly two secondary features, which was a discipline comparison grid for information design and a CSS only lightbox for interaction. And also the required advanced responsive design paths with real breakpoints. So everything you see traces back to the four pages and one shared data file. So how the files are organized, my HTML isn't one giant file per page. It's more like assembled from four shared includes plus whatever is unique to that page. The header.php file holds the doc type and opens the body.nav.php. It's the site header and primary navigation, the same on every page. The footer.php closes the body tag and prints the site footer. The unique part of each page, which is like the actual content section, lives inside a main element in the page file itself between the nav include and the footer include. So structure and navigation are centralized in includes, and content sections are the only thing that changes per page. That's the include part and the core build that requires. I kept it to exactly four includes plus four page files, no extra partials. So because of the size, with more fragmentation would have cost me more than it saved. So with one interaction cycle on the gallery file, I'll show you. So, yeah, so the gallery you see. So that's an example of one of them. So each on Gallery PHP, every mastery tile is a link. The href equals a hash like a pound member pointing at a hidden lightbox div with that same ID. When the visitor clicks the tile, the browser's own hash navigation kicks in. The URL fragment changes, and that div now matches the CSS column target pseudo class. My lightbox root starts at display none, and the target root overrides the display block. So the visual response, which is like a full screen overlay appearing, is driven entirely by that once selector change. No click handler, no JavaScript. The closed link just points back to URL without that hash. So target stops matching and as it disappears. Design tokens and via the CSS custom properties. My whole color system is 5 custom properties declared at once at the top of the style file. On the root selector, Coral, Tea, Sunshine, Ink, and Paper. Every component in that file, the hero, gradient, the buttons, the display tags, the form, focus states, all of that. References the var call or var.t or var.coral call instead of typing in a hex code. That's the design token part of the assignment. So consistency doesn't come from me remembering the hex value correctly 40 different times or 50 different times, as many times as I need to be. It comes from one declaration, everything else points up. So if I wanted to rebrand the whole site to a different palette, I change 5 lines at the top of the file and every component downstreams updates automatically. I picked this 5 specifically for the makerspace feel I wanted. Cora and Teal read as energetic and give up like creative without tipping into neon, and ink and paper give me a warm, high contrast base that put text on. So with the resizing and like the concrete accessibility techniques, um, PC, yeah. So actually, never mind. So three real techniques, not just good intentions. One, every member photo gets its alt text straight from the PHP array's name field. So a screen reader always hears an actual artist name, never like a blank or generic image announcement. The second one was like my nav has like area label primary, point to primary. So a screen reader navigating by landmarks here's primary navigation, not just navigation with no context. And the lightbox close link has aerial label to close since the visible character is just an times symbol, which alone means nothing to a screen reader. And the third one was my comparison grid on the compare PHP file is built from divs, not a real table element, because table elements are hard to make responsive. So I manually restored table semantics with row table or row or row cells, so assistive text still announce it is correctly. So with the heading hierarchy, every page has exactly one H1. That's like the page real title, like member gallery or commission a piece, and headings down one level at a time, never skipping. So on the home page, H1 is the hero headline, H2 is featured members, and each member's name inside that section is an H3, one level under its section heading. On the gallery page, the member names inside the hidden lightbox libs are H2s because each one functions as its own mini standalone view once you land on it via the hash link, not just a subsection of anything else on the page. The one non-obvious code that was the compare and contact pages staying at a single H1 with no H2s underneath. There just wasn't a second logical section to name on either page, and I also didn't want to force headings that don't describe real content divisions. So with this one, the most common layout region on the site is the mastery gallery. I use CSS like multi-column layout, the columns property rather than grid, because true mastery with variable high items is exactly what a multi-column is built for. So yeah, so if you can so yeah, if you see it, yeah, so with different like columns, like changing to different columns, you see how like it differs, all of that. So yeah, so the container root starts at one column on mobile. Each tile has break inside a void, so a photo and its caption never gets split across a column boundary. Then two media queries change nothing but the column value. Two columns pass 600 pixels, three pass 1024 pixels. So yeah, as you saw like in the live showing, that's how it is. So you just give it like a few seconds to resize, and you see how like the pictures change, like with which dimension you put it on. So yeah. So retrospective, what worked and what I changed. So since I worked on this project alone, my retrospective is a really self-review against my own commit history rather than like a team debrief. What helped me most was locking scope on day one. So I had exactly one code build, two secondary features, and nothing more. So which meant that I never had to cut half build work later. Building the data file first before any page existed was the other thing that paid off, because every page I wrote after that had real array driven content immediately instead of placeholder text I have to come back and replace. So if I had ran this again, however, I'd write a responsive Q&A checklist on day 3 instead of like day 5, because I was testing viewpoint weights mentally as I styled, but I didn't have it written down until the very end, which made it a little bit hard to prove steady testing throughout. But working solo also meant no merge conflicts and no waiting on anyone else's reviews, which is its own trade-off. So like it has fast iteration, but no second set of eyes catching mistakes they shift, before they ship, sorry. And also because I did this solo, there's no really any pull request review cycle. It's a single repo on main, but I held myself to the same discipline that I would if I was in the group. So every commit is one working logical change describing the passage, not just the giant end of day dump. So you can see that in the commit history in all of them. So it just like different ones that throw functions as my process log would like as it was supposed to do. So anyone can look at my commit history and see that the project being built in order, core first, then secondary features, then the Q&A, rather than just appearing all at once, like when you finally look at the end of the project. So with the division responsibilities, obviously no team to split the different like PHP, HTML across. So I treated the separation of concerns the same way I would if it were like a team, because that's what actually keeps like a code base maintainable regardless of team size. Data logic lives only in the data PHP file and never touches markup. Page files handle structure and PHP control flow, but never hard code or color. They reference CSS classes and let the style CSS file own every visual decision. So using that discipline is really why the include pattern and the custom property color system both worked. They only pay off if you're consistent about which file is responsible for which layer, and I made sure to hold that line the same way it would have been if it was like multiple people doing it. But if I were to do this with teammates, obviously I'd have split it into different sections the same way I did this like 3 different sections. I was split into like teammates depending on how many people are on the team. So one person will handle the data, the PHP files, and the PHP logic. One on the page templates. One owning the style sheet, because the file boundaries are already built like double as like natural ownership like boundaries. Separation of concerns. PHP logic lives in exactly 2 places, which are the data arrays, and they include the data PHP file and the validation block at the top of content of PHP file. The HTML structure lives in the the page files, and the 3 layout includes CSS is one file, which is the style of the CSS file, and there are 0 inline style attributes anywhere in the project. So every visual rule lives in that one style sheet. So where the separation gets genuinely tight is the content of the PHP file itself, in the post validation logic and the forms HTML markup live in the same file. So because the form needs to redisplay the visitor's type values and error messages in line with the fields, I didn't split that into separate processing files because it's a 4-page solo project. One process and a render file for the form was the more method of choice than routing it back through a second file for a single form. I thought about splitting content of PHP into a separate process, the PHP file, that redirects back with a status flag, which is more textbook separation. But for a single form on a 4-page site, that adds a whole lot like extra file and a redirect round trip for every little real benefit. So planning the code, my planning packet written before I touched the code itself was already named the 2 secondary features and the exact breakpoints I ended up shipping. The responsive strategy section says breakpoint 1600 pixels tablet and breakpoint to 1024 pixels desktop. Those are the literal numbers in my 2 app media rules in the style of the CSS file today, not rounded or adjusted later. The wireframe notes also specifically call out that the commission form should stay single column and also full width on mobile, and that's exactly how the layout the commission form class produces. So I never had to revisit that decision because the planning packet had already made the call before implementation even started. So that's the piece I want to underline. None of the numbers got adjusted after the fact to match what I happened to build. The planning packet which I did before the coding is what determining the implementation, not the other way around. So one of the features was the submission on the contact page. So if you want to sponsor, so you go to find commission actually. So you cannot be serious. Okay. So yes, so I'm gonna show you an example. Put my name, no email, ceramics, and uh, plate made with stained glass, something. Scroll and send inquiry. Sorry. So it returns like the red message that valid email is required. So if I put in the email and send inquiry, it fixes itself. Yeah. So that's the full trace back into browser. So layer one PHP, the contact of PHP checks if the request method is post, pulls name, email, discipline message out of the post, trims and runs each through the HTML special charge, and then validates them. The name of the message cannot be empty, as you saw. Email has to pass the filter var with filter validate email. And if every check passes, it starts a session and stores the name and discipline in a session last inquiry. The second layer HTML further down the same file, and if submitted block echoes those sanitized variables directly into a confirmation paragraph. And then the third layer CSS, that paragraph sits inside a div with class alert and success, which style the CSS renders as a green tinted box with bold text. So as you saw in the video. So here's a real bug from my own commit history when I swap my placeholder in the shows, because I initially, before I put my pictures in on the gallery, I had like initials like to hold until I got pictures to use. So when I swapped my placeholder initials avatars for actual member photos, I kept the existing like size and rules with 100% a fixed aspect ratio of 4:3. But I forgot that a real image element with a fixed aspect ratio and no object fit still stretches it still stretches the source image to fill that box instead of just cropping it. So every photo that wasn't already exactly 4:3 looked visibly squashed or stretched on the gallery page. The root cause is a missing CSS property, not just a layout problem. The box sizing was correct. The image fitting behavior inside the box was not. So the fix was just one line, adding the object fit cover to both avatar and avatar tile, so the browser crops instead of distorts. That change is bundled in my swap placeholder avatars for member artwork commit. So as you see on like the code screen, the difference in the both commits. Architecture trade-off. So I seriously considered two approaches for rendering my member cards, which were hard coding six near identical HTML blocks, one per member, or building one PHP array and looping it over with 4 each against a single markup template. So given my actual constraints, being like working on this project my own, and the amount of time I had to do this in, and this data appearing in 3 different places, the home page, the full gallery, and the lightbox, Hard-coded HTML meant any change to the card layer had to be repeated correctly in 18 different places, 6 members times 3 locations. I went with the array and for each. The trade-off I accepted going that route. If there's a bug in the template logic, it now affects all 6 members simultaneously instead of just one broken card. So I'm trading isolated failure for consistency and dramatically less duplicated code to maintain. I also considered a middle option, which was to keep the array but still write out all 6 separate for each calls, 1 per output location. But I also rejected that too, since it would have reintroduced the same duplication problem 1 level up. And then accessibility and edge case. The edge case I want to demonstrate is the keyboard only navigation through the lightbox direction. Since it's CSS only, I also wanted to confirm that it didn't quietly break keyboard access. And because every Mansory tile and every lightbox close control is a real anchor tag, not a div with like a click handler, they're automatically part of the page in that page's natural tab order, and enter activates them exactly the way a mouse click would for free from the browser. I caught this by literally unplugging my mouse and tabbing through the gallery.php. So the tab lands on each tile in the order they appear in the HTML, and enter opens the lightbox. Tab again reaches the close link, enter closes it. So I'm going to demonstrate that for you. So if you go to gallery, and then you see like the tab moving from one tile to another. Yeah, so in that same light, and also tab and enter also takes it out. So opens one and also able to close it two at the same time. And then the fragile area and reflector plan. The most fragile spot in the code base is the coupling between compare.php's data label attributes and the CSS that reads them. Each span in a comparison row has a data label attribute, which is like a discipline, time to learn, and so on, written in PHP, matched purely by which column position it's in. My CSS then uses attribute data label inside a before root to print that label on small screens before the tablet breakpoint switches to a real 5-column grid. The fragility in it is that nothing enforces those two lists staying in sync. If I ever reorder the columns in the PHP loop without also reordering the corresponding CSS logic, the mobile labels will silently attach to the wrong values with no error thrown anywhere. My refactor plan will be to pull the column label list into the PHP path as its own array, and have compare.php generate the data label attributes from that array in a loop instead of typing them by hand. So there's actually one source of truth. And to verify the refactor didn't break anything, I'd rerun my QA checklist at all 3 breakpoints and confirm the mobile labels still match their values. I'd also add a short PHP assertion in dev mode that checks the label array and the discipline array are the same length before I render, so a future mismatch throws a visible error immediately instead of like silently mislabeling a column. So all these make up the features and the part of my project. It covers all 11 questions and 5 defense items, each tied to actual code or the demos I showed. Everything I referenced today in the files, the PHP validation, the CSS breakpoints, and the community tree is in the GitHub repo along with the Planet packet and the Q&A checklist. So, thank you.